Welcome, everyone, to Perspective and Potential, where we explore fresh ways to view the world around us and unlock the powerful potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Strait, along with my co-host and mother, Gwen Fun. We're here to explore with you in each episode through ideas, stories, and strategies that can help you grow, shift your perspective, and step into a fuller version of yourself. Whether you're looking to make a big change or curious about small steps you can take today, we're here to inspire, encourage, and help you along the way. If you want to learn more about who we are, we have an introductory bio on our webpage. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. In today's episode, we're diving into a topic that impacts all of us: stress. We'll examine how stress affects our ability to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, and how it plays a crucial role in our daily interactions and decision-making. We're also taking a closer look at the stigmas around mental health, shedding light on how our mindset and emotional well-being are deeply connected to our overall physical health. So, let's explore practical ways to manage stress, embrace healthier responses, and understand the powerful link between our mind and our body. Join us today as we unpack this vital topic together. So, Mom, I want to just start out by debunking the myth for all of our listeners on the brain being a purely electrical nervous system. So I think that there's just this view that the brain is the only thing that communicates. But really, the research indicates that only a small percentage of neuronal communication is electrical, right? The role of our hormones and peptides play a very crucial role in our overall brain function. I know those were a lot of scientific words, so help us kind of unpack what we mean by that.
Well, we have to talk about the research of Dr. Candace Pert in order to kind of understand all that better. So in the early 2000s, she was doing her doctoral dissertation, and she decided to research around finding the opiate receptor and how that, all worked. But what she found was something much bigger in the process of her research. Her research actually united immunology, endocrinology, neurophysiology, psychology, and biology. She discovered that the chemicals that are running our body and brain are the same chemicals that are involved in our emotions. And she also discovered that the brain is integrated into the body at a molecular level, and therefore neither can be treated separately without the other being directly affected. So our bodies and minds are deeply interconnected, and understanding this connection is crucial for our overall well-being. We manufacture these things called peptides. They're really just short-chain amino acids that perform important functions like regulating our blood pressure, or sometimes they act as hormones. And so we're going to kind of go over a few of those that are instrumental in our well-being mentally and physically and in our emotions. We make things called endorphins. They're really a neurotransmitter that act as the body's natural painkiller, and they elevate our mood, and they really help us with stress relief. Dopamine is our reward chemical. It makes us feel really good, excited, happy, but it's also a key component in addiction. Serotonin is another one of those hormones that just kind of helps us stay stable. It stabilizes our mood. Then we have oxytocin. We call it the love drug because we get that through physical touch, whether you're petting your cat or dog, or whether you're hugging your honey or playing with your baby. that physical touch is actually going to help us to secrete this hormone called oxytocin.
Being in education and especially working with young kids, I there's this statistic out there that that we need 8 to 10 physical touches a day to help maintain our physical and emotional health. And I would always kind of joke, when I would share that statistic with people that, if you just go walk into a kindergarten or first grade classroom, those kids are just so eager to come up and give you, a hug, and give you that embrace. And so, we look at children and why they're so happy. And that might be because they're just so easily willing to show you that they care about you, with some physical affection.
And it's an unconscious need, and they react very quickly to just, they need the hug, and I guess they assume that we need it as well. So there's another hormone called GABA that keeps our neural communication under control. But if that one's disrupted, then people end up with seizures. But the one we're kind of going to focus on today is cortisol. It's a steroid hormone that helps our body respond to stress. And it regulates our metabolism and suppresses inflammation. It's made in the adrenal gland. And if you study cortisol, you can see that it has definite physical effects on our body. Our adrenal glands can get overwhelmed from producing too much of it. And our metabolism can be disrupted from too much cortisol. So the interesting thing about our body is that it is constantly trying to keep us stable. That's a process called homeostasis. And it responds to external conditions and the different changes. So like anything from the outside that we're introducing into the body, people who have addictions to anything really, but we'll just talk about maybe the uppers, the drugs, the heroin and all that stuff. So as we're introducing these foreign things into our body that cause an abnormal flux of dopamine, for instance, into the system, then the body is going to react through this homeostasis process to try to limit and regulate the effect that outside force is going to have on us. And so like in the case of dopamine, for instance, when the dopamine is just way, way too much, it starts to shut down the dopamine receptors so that no matter how much, they put in, the body can only receive so much. Alcohol has a different thing, but in all of these things, it is the same process that the body is going to fight anything that is over and above what it expects to be normal. And as long as we keep putting things in from the outside, and that can be sugar, right? Or chocolate. Whatever we're putting in there that sends our hormones out of the level that the body wants, it's going to fight back by making it harder for the body to receive the outside sources.
So why do people gravitate towards habits that can become so addictive?
Because it's a quick fix, right? And the honest truth is then as they have had these habits, and whatever they might be, pornography, it could be anything, right? As we make these habits and we're telling our body, you don't need to make this because I'm going to send it in from the outside. And if you stop taking that substance or stop doing that habit that is causing, those hormones to be elicited, then you create a lot of stress within your body because if you stop doing it, it's waiting for those hormones to be triggered and they're not.
So what do you mean by that?
So, a person who drinks or smokes, it makes them feel calm. And the body has responded, but the body continues to need more. It creates this internal stress on their body. And what happens is each of our cells have hundreds of thousands of very tiny receptors that sit on the surface of the cell. Now, 95% of those receptors are neuropeptide receptors. And each receptor is like a tiny scanner looking for the exact chemical that fits into it like a key in a lock. And when that chemical comes along, it sends its message deep within the cell, and that triggers a chain of biochemical reactions that can create both a positive or a negative change in that cell. Dr. Pert explains that if the cell is the engine that drives all of life, then the receptors are the buttons on the control panel, and the peptides are the fingers that push those buttons. So emotions are very real. They exist in time and space. They're located throughout our minds and our bodies. Peptides weave this body systems into a single web that reacts to both internal and external environmental changes with complex and subtly orchestrated responses. Dr. Pert contends that intelligence is located not only in the brain, but in the cells that are distributed throughout our body, and that the traditional separation of mental processes, including emotions, from the body are no longer valid.
I go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, where I think that there is this stigma around mental health, because for so long, I feel like society has this idea that we've treated emotional struggles as weaknesses rather than seeing them as vital aspects of overall health that we all go through. Every single one of us here on this planet are, we do succumb to some stressors around us. And I think that this misunderstanding ignores that there is an undeniable connection between our mind and our body, and how stress, anxiety, unresolved emotions, or trauma can actually manifest as very real physical ailments, such as headaches, fatigue, or even chronic illnesses. And I feel like if you Google your symptoms at any point in time, it's going to tell you that you're clinically depressed. And not that absolutely there are those who would fit that description and that would be appropriate. But I think we just, as a whole, should start recognizing that mental health is an essential component to our physical health. And in order to break that stigma, we have to embrace the reality that our whole well-being, we've got to care about both.
Absolutely. So mental disorders are really no different in a lot of ways than the other systemic disorders that we face. For instance, diabetes. There's there's a problem in the body where the cells are no longer recognizing the insulin, and so people who have diabetes, then they have to learn to change their diet. They have to learn how to, cope with and adapt to that.
Right.
And so some of the mental health disorders are pretty much the same. People who have chronic depression, for instance, they need to learn how to adapt their routines and maybe take their medications or whatever they have to do, because mental health symptoms generally look like behaviors. People who are depressed kind of drag around. They just, they don't want to do a whole lot. People with ADHD, unfortunately, they notice everything and they move a lot. So learning to identify the mental health related disorders and then finding the best possible ways to adapt. For instance, when I was doing counseling, I had a lady come in who had lost her son in a terrible accident. And it had been 2 or 3 months that she had just crawled into a shell. During the grieving process, she just couldn't seem to get out of it. And she was to a point where she stayed in her pajamas all day. And, she's mostly just stayed in bed. She was just overcome with so much grief. But she finally got up the gumption to come and ask for help. And so as we talked, I told her, well, here's what I recommend. Why don't you every morning get up and get dressed like you did today and make your bed, and then come back and see me in a week? She said, okay, I'll do that. It was very simple, right? So every day that week, she got up and she got dressed, made her bed, and then that mandated that she had to go into the living room or the kitchen, right? And she would have a little something to eat, and she would look out the window and see the birds and the trees and the grass. So she comes back the next week and she says, well, yeah, I feel a little better, but I still, I'm overcome with, the sadness and the thoughts. I said, okay, I want you to keep doing what you did this week. But now this week, I want you to go out and take a walk along with that, and then come back and see me next week. So she did that. And each week as she came and we added another thing for her to do, the depression started to lift, and she started to get to the point where she was able to then deal with the grief. And of course, coming and talking and being able to talk about her grief, was helpful too. But sometimes, that's what we need. We need to be able to access those hormones in our body in order to help us take that step up, right?
Well, exactly. And I love that story because, at the end of every episode, we say something, and we say small changes, every small change can lead to something big. And I think that's just the perfect story, that there's hope by just making a few small changes, and over time, layered, it has the ability and the opportunity for us to completely change the course of our life. Something that Candace Pert also talks about, and that caught my attention, was the topic of body-mind conversations. It's so true that our emotions absolutely have an effect on our body, and particularly when we feel stressed. So, to share a couple of examples that may be in opposition to each other. But the other day I was feeling pretty stressed about some standard meetings, but there were many of them that I have at work. And combining that with the list of things that I wanted to get done for my family, I kept going through the day, and I really wasn't allowing myself ever a moment to have a conversation about the things that I was stressed about and how it was impacting my body, but yet it was. And I started to feel this horrible tension coming in my head, and I was getting a headache. There were knots in my shoulders. I mean, just aching, and I was constantly rolling my shoulder back, and it wouldn't go away. And I felt like my body was waving this big red flag saying, hey, pay attention. So I found a quiet, 15, 20 minutes where I could really just ask myself those questions. All right, what am I feeling? And I named it for myself. I even wrote it down. Okay, this is how I'm feeling. All right, how is my body feeling right now? Well, I feel like my heartbeat is fast. I feel tired and my muscles ache. And then I started to ask myself some of those questions like, well, what thoughts are going on in my head? Right. And the reason I think sometimes as I'm going through this long list of things that I have to do, my mind is still trying to process the stress that's going on around me. But in this moment, I had the ability to really write it down. And then I was able to look at it and go, oh, okay, some of these thoughts that are going on in my head, some of them haven't happened. Some of them have, but now I can kind of address it and And then I was able to think about what is it that my body is actually needing in this moment. And I wanted to feel motivated because I was feeling tired and achy and sick. And I felt like I had so many things to do. I didn't have time to feel this way. But then you contrast that with like on a day where maybe I get all of my to-do lists done. And on Friday, I really like to run the vacuum and mop my floors on Friday night so that on Saturday morning when I come down, I feel like I have a fresh, clean house and kitchen. And the funny thing is, on the days when I do that, I actually have more energy to go about things that I want to take on. And I actually feel more motivated to not just do the to-dos, but also to set goals. And so it made me just kind of stop and think, why does the body react so intensely to emotion?
Well, so our bodies and brains are designed to handle a certain amount of stress. In fact, healthy stress is what activates the receptors that move us to get up, take care of ourselves, perform necessary daily functions. However, all of us have what we call a stress tolerance threshold. And when we exceed that, it does have a negative effect on us. So people with a lot of trauma or triggers, people who have ill health or mental health issues, addictions, um, they all are already loaded. Really, their stress tolerance level is already loaded, and it really doesn't take much to send them over the edge to where they feel intense stress and the need to to try to relieve that in some way. So when we overwhelm our ability to handle surrounding stress, we a lot of times will react in unwise and unhealthy ways, either anger, violence, taking substances, being promiscuous. And so, like I say, mental health problems generally look like behaviors. So we need to be very, very aware, not just in ourselves, but actually as we look at other people, and trying to take that stigma of mental health away. You can actually look at someone's behavior and see that they're dysregulated in their stress tolerance.
Right. So we've talked a lot about what's going on in our brain and the very real truth that stress does have an impact on our body. But without resorting to destructive habits that actually, in turn, like you said, create more stress on our body, what coping mechanisms are out there? What's available to us to help us return to homeostasis?
Well, I like your example when you talked about the two different episodes in your life, where the one was very stressful and it had you, having these unhealthy, headaches or tension in your shoulders or in your neck. And then the other one where you're vacuuming and you're getting everything ready and you're being, it was because both of those show that we have a personal pharmacy right in our brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to learn how to stay ahead of the unhealthy stress through natural coping techniques. We already know, right, that a serotonin is going to level us down. So, but we also know that exercise and eating correctly and those kind of things make good hormones that make us feel better. So getting in touch with our body and learning, about this pharmacy in our brain and how to utilize it in a positive way rather than a negative one. So Dr. Pert had a list of healthy, what she recommended as healthy coping techniques. And the first one was becoming conscious. So recognizing actually what's going on, like you did with your first example.
Right. When I had all those meetings and I just was like, okay, I I need And it's funny because it starts out by recognizing, oh, I've got this headache. I need to take some, ibuprofen, or I need to take some sort of pain reliever. And that can only go on for so long before I have to acknowledge, oh, wait, maybe there's a reason why I'm feeling this way. And so, like you said, yeah, that first step is, I think, becoming conscious, and then we go on to,
Well, but you also did something else. Once you became conscious of what was going on inside of you, you took the next step, which was to take a minute to remove yourself and do some self-care.
yep,
Honestly, self-care is written all through this. This is self-care. This is how we can maintain a positive environment within the cells of our body. Um, so because our body and our brain are having these conversations, and like we talked about how the neuropeptides, 95% of the receptors on our cells are actually neuropeptide receptors. And that means they're encoding all of our emotions and our stress into our individual cells.
well,
And they're reacting.
and I think I've been able to do this for enough time that I do start to recognize, and it doesn't take me too long to become conscious of the tie between stressors and my physical health. And I think what I would just encourage listeners is to know that this is a skill that, as you practice it, like we talked about in our very first episode, as you start to take the Viktor Frankl pause, not just in our interactions with other people, but with ourselves, and just a moment. Like I said, it didn't take me long, but 15 to 20 minutes of just being thoughtful and kind of walking myself through what I was feeling, and then building a plan of how I was going to, that's kind of what I didn't get to, but the very last step for me was like, okay, what am I going to do about this? Within 15 to 20 minutes, I was able to bring myself back to a more regulated state of being so that I could function more normally, quote unquote.
Yeah. And
Um,
again, that pause might be a 2-minute pause. It might be a 2-hour pause. It
right.
might be a whole weekend that you need to kind of
Yeah.
dysregulate, but you need to do that self-care. You need to listen to the body and mind conversations that are manifesting in these different symptoms, and realize, that uh, it isn't always just biological. A lot of times it is mental as well.
I think, if we could put this in a list of 5 action steps for everyone who's listening today. You said the first one is becoming conscious. And then we
Mm-hmm.
just talked about the second one being that body mind conversation. All right. Just recognizing, hey, what's going on outside of me? What's happening inside my body and my brain? And then the third thing is, I think, recognizing, well, what do I
The
need?
Well, yeah, the need that the body is trying to shout out to us, right?
Right.
So maybe we're feeling fatigued. Okay, maybe it wants us to rest for a minute. Maybe it needs the quiet peace of that little moment. Maybe we're feeling a lack of motivation. We need to understand, maybe we're pushing ourselves in a direction that we really don't want to go.
Right.
Uh, so what need is the body trying to, express to us so that we can come up with the particular antidote for that need? Maybe it is the weekend getaway, right? Or maybe it's just about 20 minutes of taking a walk in the park, listening to the birds, getting some vitamin D or whatever. And, um, you know, or maybe it is that connection. Maybe we need those 8 to 10 hugs.
Well, and I think that's that fourth step, right? So we recognize the need, and then you need to
Medicate accordingly.
medicate accordingly. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, when we say that, we don't want to give the wrong impression. We do have a pharmacy within our own body, right?
Mhm.
And so we need to learn how to access that and use that as a first line of defense and make a functional choice versus a dysfunctional one. So exercise. So three things that are really good for anxiety: um, deep breathing, exercise, and eating. Right. But what are we eating, right? Are we going in and we're going to have a banana or an apple or, maybe, something that will satisfy us in a healthy way? Or are we going to go in and grab the half gallon of ice cream and eat half of it, right?
Right.
So, or, people who have addictions, right? So they're feeling like depressed, and so they want to take something to make them feel better. um, Maybe they should go take a jog, right, instead of taking some kind of substance that's going to overreact with their system. I used to do EMDR, which is a therapy where you take people back in a very relaxed state to their trauma or the trials that are keeping them kind of stuck. And the interesting thing about doing that EMDR was that you get them back, and when they finally start to dysregulate again, you ask them, "Okay, where are you feeling that?"
Yeah.
And, a lot of times, well, most times they'll have an actual physical reaction to the trauma that's being relived in their brain. Sometimes it's in the throat or the jaws. And that's usually an indication that at that particular point in history, they wanted to yell, scream, or talk back, and they could not. Maybe it's in their hands where they feel like, they wanted to lash out, they wanted to hit, they wanted to push, and they could not. Because those feelings, they are encoded right in our cells. And so all these triggers that people tend to have, their reaction is usually from an encoding in the cells at the time of whatever the situation was that they felt uncomfortable or hurt. But we do sometimes need medications, like
Right.
people with, ADHD. They need certain medications to help them regulate the hormones in their brain that are not being regulated.
Well, and that so that fourth step of medicating accordingly.
Mhm.
I'll go back. When we do all of these things, when we become conscious, when we have a body mind conversation, when we recognize the need, and we medicate accordingly, whatever that may be, like you said, whether it's something accessing the pharmacy within us, getting help, taking medication, whatever it is, what we achieve is not just our mental health, but I really do believe that the goal is that body mind wholeness, that you cannot just have mental health. You
Ab-
really, it's the whole thing,
oh, and you can't just have physical health. They
right?
are so interconnected that, we can't take care of one without the other. And if we do, um, you know, take care of the body and not the mind, we're still going to have physical ailments. And consequently, the same thing the other way. If we just, use our minds and neglect our body, we're going to have some mental health issues where maybe, depression or whatever from
And
lack of exercise.
like Candace Pert said, right? The body is the unconscious mind, and it's keeping the score.
Absolutely. It does underscore the profound interconnectedness of our physical and our mental states. All of our feelings and thoughts are encoded in every cell of our body. If we neglect the body mind connection and allow the stressors to overwhelm us, we open ourselves to physical deterioration as well. So we have to listen to the signals and conversation between our brain and our body in order to optimize our full potential.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here to do, right? Optimize that full potential. Well, as we come to a close today, let's just pinpoint the most crucial points from our talk and consider how they apply to our daily lives. So first, we need to understand the impact that stress has on our physical and mental well-being. And then we do have the power to take proactive steps towards nurturing a healthy mind and body connection. In our next episode, we are going to explore a question that I feel like a lot of people would like the answer to, and that is, what's the key to happiness? You think we have that?
Well, we'll see.
If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please engage with us by sharing your thoughts or requests for a topic on our website or through social media, and help spread the conversation about perspective and potential. Your insights truly make our dialogue richer. We're Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives, and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought.
Bon appetit.